The Big Ten Conference is not known for producing high-level quarterback play, and I think all of us understand that given the history of this conference, where over the past decade, only Ohio State has produced any quarterback that we care about who's gone off to the NFL, and that basically goes for the same in college in terms of awards, All-American status, and winning big games, outside of JJ McCarthy from last season at Michigan. But McCarthy is gone. Stroud is sadly now a distant memory in college football. The world moves on. He's doing well with the Texans. And Bo Nix from Oregon, Caleb Williams from USC, Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, even Kyle McCord, who, let's be honest here, was good. Not great at Ohio State, but good. Taulia Tagovailoa from Maryland, and again, JJ McCarthy. Those were the 6 original 14 Big Ten teams plus the 4 new Big Ten teams, former Pac-12 teams. Those were the 6 quarterbacks out of those 18 teams who finished in the top 25 of ESPN's QBR, the only 6. They're all gone. So there is a lot of uncertainty in regards to how good the Big Ten quarterbacks will be this coming season. And when you have a lot of uncertainty, there is a massive opportunity for breakthrough. And that's what we are going to be talking about today, who are some breakout candidates for the Big Ten in terms of starting quarterback spots this season. Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. It's your host, College Football with Sam. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so that you can get notified when I post more Big Ten football content. Comment your Big Ten quarterback number 1 down in the comments below. I'm leaning toward, personally, Miller Moss or Dillon Gabriel, but I gotta be honest with you, I'm not strongly attached to either of those selections, and even if I pick one of those 2, which is likely to be the best quarterback in the Big Ten in my preseason predictions, I don't think Miller Moss will be as good as Caleb Williams, and I don't think Dillon Gabriel will be as good as Bo Nix. I think the overall ceiling for Big Ten quarterback play, even compared to last year, will be lower. I don't think Miller Moss or Dillon Gabriel are even a JJ McCarthy level player. They'll probably put up much better numbers than he did, but in terms of NFL potential and in terms of just the raw ceiling of play at not just the professional level, but the collegiate level, I don't think you will see the same skill sets from those 2. And for the rest of quarterbacks, who knows at this point? Moss is in a proven system, and Dillon Gabriel is a proven quarterback who's won games for UCF and won games for Oklahoma and has just been an amazing player, and I bet he will win games for Oregon. Whether it's those 2 or whether it is another candidate, maybe Ohio State's Will Howard, Penn State's Drew Allar, maybe you want to go bold and even say Cade McNamara or Gavin Wimsatt or Luke Altmaier or Dylan Raiola. Or maybe you want to go to another team, maybe Hudson Card in Purdue. Who knows? Or MJ Morris at Maryland. We have 18 Big Ten teams and 18 quarterback spots that have some level of uncertainty to them. This is not like Michigan last year where you had a top 20, top 15 quarterback returning in JJ McCarthy along with all of his offense, and you knew he was going to take a step forward. This is not like Ohio State in 2022 where they had the best quarterback in the nation return because he was too young to go to the NFL. Every quarterback position in this conference has some level of uncertainty and some level of questions compared to either last year or just in general because they haven't had good quarterback play. And we all know that having at least average, above average to elite quarterback play is a requirement to take a step forward, especially in a Power 4 conference, or maybe we should say Power 2 with the SEC and the Big Ten drifting away into their own league. But comment who you think the Big Ten's best quarterback will be down below. And also, if you want to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon page and subscribe to it as an all-conference, all-American, or Heisman member using the link in the description. You can also check out my merchandise page, again, via the link to the store in the description. or the pinned comment, where you will find my Patreon link as well in the pinned comment at the top of the comment section. Thanks to Crash2488 for sponsoring this video as a Heisman member. Thanks to Spencer Bringhurst, Chris Lane, and SFS Inverted for sponsoring this video as All-American members. And thanks to Will Loftus, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for sponsoring this video as all-conference members. First and foremost, I want to start out with Aidan Chiles. And before I go any deeper, I want to make clear what my quote-unquote requirements are for these 5 breakout candidates at quarterback. A breakout candidate is someone who fits into a team/system that will somewhat rely on quarterback play to win them games. So Cade McNamara at Iowa, I'm sorry, but you're out. And it's not just because of that. He is also a proven player. We know what Cade McNamara's ceiling is. His best year at the end of his career will probably be the 2021 season at Michigan. I also wouldn't put Gavin Wimsatt on this list, even though I think he has a higher ceiling and more talent than most give him credit for. He does not have an elite offensive coordinator, and the offense that is run by Kirk Shiraka, who is a good, great offensive coordinator, but I don't think an elite one, is very run-heavy. In fact, it's more run-heavy than any of Jim Harbaugh's offenses at Michigan, than any of them. So even with Wimsatt's higher ceiling, and I do think his ceiling is high, he was recruited out of high school as a mid to high-level 4-star player, which is pretty good for all the players that play high school football. The offensive system just won't allow him to put up big numbers, and even if he is a great quarterback, which will help a lot, he will be less relied on than a normal quarterback at a Power 4 school would be. That's just my opinion, but I also don't think that he will be good enough to be a breakout candidate in general. But I could be wrong. Again, this is just preseason opinion. And last but not least, these players, they have to have either started last year in limited or full capacity and have underperformed, or have just an insanely high ceiling, the potential to do much better than they did last season, or they have to be newcomers. So whether it's Aidan Chiles here or Miller Moss at USC. I didn't include Miller Moss on this list because he broke out in the Holiday Bowl, and he's in a proven system, so I think everyone with a brain knows that he very likely will be at least a good quarterback next year. And, I mean, I can't imagine him not being a good quarterback next year, because even Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma really was an above-average good quarterback that just wasn't great enough for Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley, who expect, and rightfully so, to have elite quarterback play every season. And now it's the same thing at USC. I think Miller Moss will be closer to elite than good. But I don't want to get too sidetracked here. Aidan Chiles is a future monster. Like I say in the third bullet point, with Jonathan Smith and his staff, which on the offensive side of the ball particularly are some of the best coaches in college football, Chiles becoming a great elite college quarterback, I think, is inevitable. The question is just when. Is it this year? Is it next year? Is it 2026? We don't know. And part of that will rely on how quickly Jonathan Smith and his staff can build Michigan State up. But make no mistake, in his true freshman season, last year at Oregon State, when Chiles played in 9 out of 13 of Oregon State's games, transferring before the 13th game against Notre Dame in their bowl game, he showed his freak athleticism and also quick adaptation to play in that system that Smith has. A system that involves tight ends, involves receivers, involves running backs, a tough offensive line, involves play action, involves game control. That's Jonathan Smith isn't running some kind of simple offense. That's not what he's doing. And to come in as a freshman and put up an elite 85.7 QBR, to have a 180.4 passer rating, to be trusted in games against Arizona, for example, or he even appeared in a game against Washington, to appear in those matchups, that shows the level of trust that Jonathan Smith has in Aidan Chiles. And he had that trust in Chiles as a true freshman. as someone coming right out of high school. He was talked about as a steal for Oregon State. He's not with Oregon State anymore. He's with the Michigan State Spartans. Threw for 309 yards last year and 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also has a keen ability to scrambled for a few touchdowns last year, and has mobility. He's definitely a breakout candidate for this season. With Jack Velling transferring in at tight end along with Tanner Miller, both from Oregon State as well, Chiles will have some familiarity not just with the coaching staff, but with the roster. That plus his high recruiting ranking out of high school, which is important because recruiting rankings are more accurate than sometimes we'd like to believe, plus his elite skill sets, his athleticism, the fact that he is an intelligent player. All of those things are reasons to believe that Aidan Chiles has a great chance of breaking out onto the scene as one of the Big Ten's best quarterbacks, potentially one of the nation's best quarterbacks in 2024. It honestly wouldn't shock me, and I can't say the same for all the other quarterbacks in this video. It wouldn't shock me if Aidan Chiles was the best Big Ten quarterback, the best. Not the second, third, fourth, the best Big Ten quarterback in the country this coming season. It's not a question of if he will be an elite quarterback, in my opinion. It is of when. And that is just my level of trust in Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren and that entire offensive staff in East Lansing. Up next, we have Alex Orji from Michigan. Now, Orji, I think, has a very high ceiling. Wasn't recruited highly out of high school. Michigan, in fact, stole him away from Virginia Tech. But he was an awesome athlete in high school. He runs the ball very well. He never had a pass attempt in 2023, never took a pass. And he only had 1 pass attempt in 2022. But he ran for 86 yards and a touchdown and 15 carries. And he was trusted to throw off Ohio State's defense, Alabama's defense, and Washington's defense. Those are all teams that last year were top 10 teams. And in terms of power rankings, Ohio State and Alabama were top 6 for much of the season, with Ohio State, in fact, being the second or first best team in the country for every day of the season up until Georgia's win over Florida State massively inflated their power ranking. But Orji has been given trust by the staff. You see that in his games against Ohio State, Alabama, and Washington, where he helped rejuvenate a rushing attack, particularly in the Ohio State game, that was just struggling against one of the best defenses in the country. I think he should start in 2024. I think he's the favorite right now. In fact, Michigan's staff, whether it's Sharon Moore or Kurt Campbell, have mentioned already in this preseason that they have been impressed with Orji's progression in passing the football. Michigan does lose 10 out of 11 offensive starters, but last year they had Georgia-type depth, despite not recruiting at a top 3, top 2, or number 1 level nationally. That's how good Ben Herbert's strength program is, and Justin Tress, the new head strength and conditioning coach, who was Ben Herbert's disciple, I think is going to run nearly the same strength and conditioning program. I can't give pure benefit of the doubt and say it will still be the number 1 strength and conditioning program in the country, but it won't take much in terms of just keeping up with expectations and continuing to win before I say, okay, Michigan still has the best strength and conditioning program in the country. That's how good Ben Herbert was at his job. And Orji is 6'3". I'm a tall guy, and he's taller than me, and Orji certainly has a lot more muscle and athleticism than I do. I think that if what is said about him by the staff is true, you honestly can't always trust staffs. You can't. Sometimes there's senile coaches or coaches who are delusional or they're playing politics. The latter is the most likely option. But we've seen Orji play. We've seen him run the ball. Haven't really seen him pass, but if what the staff says about his passing ability is true, if that what if about his arm goes the great route instead of the terrible route, or even if it's just in the middle, if some other things go Michigan's way, he can absolutely be a great quarterback and be one of the Big Ten's better quarterbacks. I'm not as high as him as I am on Chiles, but I absolutely believe Orji can break out. I love dual threat quarterbacks. I think that now more than ever, they are somewhat a necessity as a part of the game. Look at Kyle McCord at Ohio State last year. CJ Stroud had the potential to at least be a quarterback who could scramble. Maybe he had the potential to be a dual threat quarterback. He didn't like to use his legs, but him having legs and having mobility and having athleticism gave him the ability to extend plays, maneuver out of the pocket, or in a game against Georgia where Ohio State almost beat the 15-0 Bulldogs and would have beaten TCU in the national title, that gave him a wrinkle to use against defenses. McCord not having that certainly handicapped Ohio State's offense, along with his arm not being as strong as Stroud's, Fields, or Haskins. Rest in peace. Orji with that mobility, with Michigan's depth at O-line, running back, tight end, and even potentially receiver with how Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan played last year, this offense could reload. And regardless if it does or doesn't, if what we have heard about Orji is true, he could be a beast. Up next, we have Dylan Raiola from Nebraska. The Cornhuskers were able to steal away Raiola from the Bulldogs on early National Signing Day, I think it was. He's a true freshman. Unlike Orji, who has been with Michigan now, I think, for 2 years. Yeah, for 2 years, I do believe. And Chiles, who's been playing in the college game for 1 year. He'll be a true sophomore, and he's appeared in more games and thrown more passes than Orji. So those quarterbacks, each in their own right, will not totally proven, or while they haven't started really any games, we've seen them play at the collegiate level. We have not seen Raiola take a single snap in college football. We haven't. So there is a lot of green here. There is. This is the ultimate boom or bust candidate. Raiola in a Nebraska offense that has typically had terrible offensive line play, that has suffered with injuries, not just on the O-line, but on the offense in general, since the beginning of the Scott Frost era, or perhaps before that, and even last year, despite the improvements on the line and in strength and conditioning. If the offense is terrible with Raiola's inexperience, there's a chance that he's pretty bad next year. If the offense is good, if they improve, I imagine Raiola can show flashes of potentially being the nation's future Heisman Trophy winner. That is the width of play that we could see from Dylan Raiola. I mean, 5-star out of high school, known for his arm strength, and known for his ball security, too. He threw very few, not through, weird, interceptions. In fact, that was something that he was not just praised for, but at times even criticized for in scouting reports. Similar to Drew Allar, being so conservative that sometimes you take sacks and you end up hurting your team more than if you just maybe threw a risky pass that if picked off could turn into somewhat of a punt, or at least it falls incomplete and you're not too far behind the chains. But being at Nebraska, he is a Nebraska legacy recruit, as his father and uncle both played for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It's good for Nebraska to have him there. It's a win for Nebraska recruiting, and it's a win, I think, for Dylan Raiola, because with what's going on at Nebraska, the improvements made at the offensive line from Micah Mezcua, transferring in from Florida, and 4 out of 5 starters coming back, and improvements made at running back, and also at wide receiver with Jamal Banks transferring in from Wake Forest, Raiola could not just play great in college and go off to the NFL. If everything goes right at Nebraska, and if he is the player that he's graded out to be in high school, well, he can also add the pin on his chest that he helped rebuild Nebraska football into a power. I don't know as much about Raiola as I do about any of the other quarterbacks on this list, because I have not seen him take a collegiate snap. He could be like Trevor Lawrence and just take over the sport and do insane things, and we'll be talking about him like a legend. Or he could be like Blake Barnett at Alabama, 5-star recruit, and we most people don't even know who Blake Barnett is because he transferred literally mid-season after starting against USC. Like that's just how bad of a bust he was in college football. No disrespect to him, just saying what his college football career was. And then you contrast that to Trevor Lawrence, who was a freshman phenom by the end of 2018, had great seasons in 2019 and 2020, and that now is winning with the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's the range that we should expect to see Dylan Raiola play at. So we really shouldn't be expecting much from him next year, as he's a true freshman, doesn't have much experience, and that plus a team that is in a rebuild means that there is a chance that he won't perform at a good, great level next year. In fact, he could be one of the Big Ten's worst quarterbacks because of his inexperience and because of his supporting cast. But he could also be one of the best for the reasons of his insane arm strength, 5-star rating. He's big, has good stature, good athleticism, and is safe with the ball. Nebraska's had problems with turnovers, and I don't think that will be one of Raiola's problems, even if his supporting cast is not good. Up next, this might be a surprise to some of you, but Brendan Sullivan has made this list. Brendan Sullivan has. Last year, he started in a few games as I believe Ben Bryant was injured. And while he wasn't phenomenal by any stretch of the imagination, he played well. And statistically, he played better than most Northwestern quarterbacks that we remember in recent memory, whether that's Ryan Helinski or even Ben Bryant, who had a worse passer rating, or whether that's Clayton Thorson or Peyton Ramsey. Sullivan's 140.2 rating is impressive, and his below average 44.4 QBR, that's not a Spencer Petras level low. That is a number that can be improved, especially with the hiring of a better offensive coordinator by David Braun from South Dakota State. That's where the new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach is from. An overhaul of the staff, and 64% of Northwestern's offensive production is coming back. They have good receivers. They have A.J. Henning, who's coming back, also a great player on special teams. And they have Bryce Kurtz returning at wide receiver as well. And they have multiple tight ends coming back, who most of them are graduates or seniors. There's a lot of experience on this offense returning. The defense was stout last year, so most of them coming back could potentially help give Sullivan more snaps in general, but also earlier in the season to improve. He's the favorite to win Northwestern's starting quarterback job in 2024 with Ben Bryant running out of eligibility. Passed for 714 yards last year, 6 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And it's not going to be often that you see a Northwestern player on this list or any list that I make, because Northwestern does not have very talented players. They don't have a reputation of developing at a high level. There's a lot unknown about that program. And they don't recruit at a high level. They don't use the portal at a high level, partially because of their high academic standards, much like Vanderbilt. They're limited. And not only that, we don't know how good of a coach David Braun is. I happen to think that he's a good coach after the job he did last year, but who knows? We'll have to see. That's only 1 year. Only 1 year, but I'm tending, based off of how those games were won, often very close victories, and the fact that Northwestern is talentless compared to much of its schedule on an annual basis, and they still eked out 8 wins, that's very impressive. And if Northwestern can get better quarterback play, better utilize those receivers, those tight ends, plus Sullivan's a runner. He ran for over 100 yards last year, despite being sacked more than I think he got sacked more than 20 times, and that was even with limited quarterback play. Northwestern did not have a good offensive line last season. They didn't, and he still ran for a few touchdowns and over 100 yards. So he has an ability to scramble, he can throw, and look for him to take this Northwestern offense with a superior offensive coordinator and much of its production returning to new heights this coming season. And finally, last but certainly not least, in terms of the fact that Drew Allar is, by career starts, the most proven quarterback on this list, Drew Allar from Penn State. Started 13 games for the Nittany Lions last year and was underwhelming. But I don't think that was necessarily his own fault. Penn State did not have a great receiver core. They had an offensive coordinator who was constantly battling with their head coach for control of that side of the football. And Allar was hyped up beyond belief. I couldn't believe that people right out of the gate were saying that he was going to be better than Kyle McCord. That made absolutely no sense, even given what we have seen from both of those quarterbacks, who were both, in my opinion, underwhelming last year, but more so Kyle McCord, given that he had better coaching, better weapons, and had been in the game for an extra year, had an extra year of experience and learning under his belt. But still, McCord was, and I'd say even far and away, the better quarterback than Drew Allar last season. And McCord gets a lot of criticism, most of it deserved, some of it, in my opinion, too harsh. But McCord is now at Syracuse, so we're not going to be talking about Syracuse and Kyle McCord too much in Big Ten content, are we? But maybe I'll make a video on Syracuse, because there's a very good chance that they could make a run, not just for a bowl game, but for a better bowl game, or dare I say it, even 12-team playoff, given the fact that their schedule's insanely weak and they're bringing in a lot of talented players from Big Ten and SEC schools, especially Kyle McCord. And Fran Brown knows how to recruit, knows how to develop, but again, conversation for a different day. Allar was hyped up to oblivion last year, and when that happens to you and you're a true sophomore and you're at a program like Penn State where you have limitations. You don't have an elite offensive line. You have questions at receiver. Penn State's receiver room last year, that had to be the worst Penn State wide receiver room since before. It might have been the worst Penn State wide receiver room in the James Franklin era. No Parker Washington. No Jahan Dotson. Even no KJ Hamler. And there are some other Penn State receivers that I'm thinking of from before all of those guys that I'm having a hard time coming up with in my head. But I know their names. They've played in the NFL. I think even one is still playing in the NFL. But not a good wide receiver room. It's upgraded with Julian Fleming transferring in and all starting receivers returning next season. The tight end room, I know Theo Johnson leaves, but Tyler Warren returns, and there is a chance that even with Theo Johnson departing, I think that Khalil Dinkins is a good tight end in waiting. So there is a chance that the tight end room just stays constant or even upgrades, because Khalil Dinkins isn't just in the depth chart. Andrew Rappelia, who was highly recruited out of high school and redshirted last year, he can play all his games that he wants, that the staff allows him to this year, and he will be good with Penn State's elite tight end development. Allar last year passed for 2,631 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He finished with a 136.9 passer rating and a good 73.7 QBR. His scrambling ability last year, that was something that I think was the most underwhelming. His passing, Josh Allen is not known for being extremely accurate in the NFL, and he's known for turning the ball over. Very boomer bust player. You saw that from Allar last year in passing, and I mentioned Josh Allen because that's who everyone compares him to, so we'll just do that. Allar didn't turn over the football a ton. Instead, he was much too conservative, and I think with Andy Kotelnicki, that will change. Not the extreme ball security, but he will make better throws, he'll be more accurate, and he'll be willing to take some good calculated risks, especially with a better offensive scheme that will probably make life easier for him in terms of passing the football downfield. But Allar was not fast as a scrambler. He was a power scrambler. Line him up under center and QB sneak it, you could not stop him because he is tall, he is big, has a lot of momentum. But he is not fast. I mean, JJ McCarthy, much faster than him on the ground. And McCarthy, mainly because he didn't use his legs all the time, was not known as a dual threat quarterback. So Allar, underwhelming quarterback last year. I think his skill set is his arm strength, the fact that he is conservative, doesn't want to turn the ball over. And I don't know too much about comparing their high school recruiting profiles, but the more I'm describing this, seems like there's a little bit of similarity between Dylan Raiola and Drew Allar, except that Drew Allar is more known as a scrambler than Dylan Raiola is. That power ability is useful, especially with Penn State's 2 guards returning, and the fact that Phil Trotween has recruited well on the offensive line means that their departures in their center and both tackles shouldn't hurt as much as that has departures on the O-line hurt in the past. Upgrades at wide receiver, an elite OC, the best OC in college football right now coming in Andy Kotelnicki, and a tight end room that I think will stay the same or perhaps get better. At minimum, it'll only get slightly worse. All those things go into Drew Allar's favor of improving next season, potentially breaking out and being a totally transformed player and maybe the best or one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. That's all I have to say in this video. Those are 5 Big Ten quarterbacks that I thought could either break out on the scene and be in the top half of the Big Ten in terms of the fact that they're new to the conference in either they haven't started a game in Big Ten play before or they're transferring in. So that's Aidan Chiles. That is Dylan Raiola. That's Alex Orji. And to a certain degree, Brendan Sullivan. But he's kind of in the middle between those 3 and Drew Allar, which is a player who started last season, and he was in the top half in terms of Big Ten quarterback play, which shows how bad Big Ten quarterback play was last year, and it's been that way for several years, where the bottom half or even bottom 2/3 or 3/4 of Big Ten quarterbacks have just been below average to awful. And he could go from that, from just being an average quarterback or a good quarterback if you really trust QBR and think that it is college football gospel, to an elite quarterback, someone who can make a big leap. That's what this video is about. Quarterbacks who can make a big leap from last year's position to this year's. It's why I didn't have Miller Moss on this list, because look, he came out in the Holiday Bowl and slung it everywhere, and he's in a proven system. I'm never going to doubt a Lincoln Riley quarterback. I will always expect high things from them, as will most. And Dylan Gabriel's a proven quarterback. He's won games at UCF, and he was not the problem for Oklahoma last year. Absolutely was not. And there are other quarterbacks who could have made this list, but I think these 5 were the best. If you think I missed a quarterback on this list, comment down below. And thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks to Crash2488 for sponsoring this channel as a Heisman member, to Spencer Bringhurst, Chris Lane, and SFS Inverted for sponsoring this video and channel as All-American members, and Will Loftus, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for sponsoring this channel and this video as all conference members. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you all around. Bye-bye.